How many losses can your team afford and still make the college football playoff in 2025? It's a question that gets answered each season as we go into a new era of the playoff. We've only had 1 year of the 12-team playoff, so we don't really know the true answer yet. And it's not as simple as it used to be. In the 4-team era, it was very simple. If you look at every team that made the 4-team college football playoff, the answer was you have to go undefeated, you can maybe afford one loss, and that's it. No two-loss team ever made the college football playoff. There were some teams that got close. I think Auburn, that 1 year, it might have been 2017 or 2018, where they had 2 losses but beat a couple number 1 teams. They were in a position where they could have made it, but they actually ended up losing a 3rd game, so we never learned the answer to that. And so generally speaking, you couldn't lose more than 1 game in that era. In this new era, it obviously looks a lot different. You've got a lot of things at play. You've got the auto bids, you've got the at-large bids, you've got the group of 5 carve-out that's in there with the 5 highest-ranked conference champions. More times than not, that 5th highest ranked conference champion is going to be a group of 5 representative. So you're going to kind of have to split it up between the group of 5 and the power conferences when you're looking at how many losses you can afford to take. So if we look at the group of 5 teams that would have made the 12-team playoff during the 4-team playoff era, so I'm talking about that 5th highest ranked conference champion, you're looking at Cincinnati a couple times, UCF a couple times, Liberty and Western Michigan, who all went undefeated and got in. You've got a few one-loss teams in there with Memphis, Houston, and Boise State, but the exceptions you have in here are 2014 Boise State and 2022 Tulane, both of whom afforded 2 losses and still would have made the playoffs if the 12-team playoff was in place in those 2 seasons. For those of you wondering, that one-loss team that's in there is Boise State. The one-loss Boise State, that's Boise State from this last season, who made it with that 1 regular season loss to Oregon. So it's pretty interesting to look at. The other thing that I think is notable is the only time that it was a non-American or Mountain West school, when it was Western Michigan and Liberty, they went undefeated. And that was what was required of the teams in those 2 conferences to make it. And so if we look at those 2 teams that were the exceptions to the rule, they had 2 losses and they were in the group of 5. Boise State that season played Ole Miss, BYU, and UConn, and Tulane played UCF twice, which was a top 25 team, and then Cincinnati, Memphis, and Houston, who were all operating at like a pretty high power conference level. A couple of those teams were transitioning to a power conference, and they played at Kansas State. So in order to be a 2-loss group of 5 team, you need to have the momentum, you need to have the brand. Boise State and Tulane have just that, and you need to be playing those big non-conference games, at least 1 or 2 power conference opponents, in order to be recognized and be on the radar. So that's what it takes as a group of 5 school. But let's go ahead and look at the power conferences. For the power conferences, we know that undefeated will get you in most of the time, if not all of the time. A undefeated power conference team will never miss, probably, and that's especially if they're winning their conference title game. They will be in. A 1-loss team, most likely going to be in. 2 losses, it's going to be case by case, but you can make it with 2 losses. And then there's the 3-loss club. So we're going to do the same thing where we look at all of the power conference teams that would have made a 12-team playoff if it was in place, and we jumble in there. You see, there's a lot of teams that would have done that. And then we've got Clemson in there. They had 3 losses. They made it this last year. They were the only one, and they did it with an auto bid. It wasn't an at-large. They made the ACC title game and won. And then notably, we still have no 4-loss teams that have been in the mix. 0 4-loss teams were even in the top 25 of the final committee rankings, which is pretty nuts. And there's also been 0 seasons where a top 2 power conference finisher had 4 losses or more, meaning teams that would have had the auto bid or an opportunity to get the auto bid. So generally speaking, you can't afford to take those losses. And especially when we're talking about a mega conference era where we've got these 16, 17, 18 team conferences, you're not going to see any team with 4 losses or more anywhere close to the top of the standings unless something super bizarre and crazy happens where they lose every non-conference game but just sweep in conference. I still don't think that's very likely. And even if that does happen, it's more likely that somehow they end up getting that bid stolen from them. So I'm not as worried about that. I don't think that's very likely at all. So we don't need to include that in the sample size. If we break out the 3-loss power conference teams by strength of schedule, we can see all of the teams have at least the 30th ranked strength of schedule or better. Clemson from this last season actually ended with the 22nd best strength of schedule, even though they weren't really in consideration for an at-large bid. They needed the auto bid to get in there. It still follows the rule, which is you need a pretty strong strength of schedule in order to be in consideration. So with all of that considered, we have all the data we need. Let's get into figuring out in 2025 how many losses each team can afford and still make the playoff. So we'll start with the 0-loss club, teams that are already eliminated. There's going to be 3 teams in this tier. It's going to be Missouri State, Delaware, and Akron, all eliminated already for differing reasons. Missouri State and Delaware are transitioning from the FCS to the FBS, and so therefore they will be ineligible to make a bowl game this season due to the transition rules there. Some schools choose to do that in different ways, but they both chose to do it in a similar way, which was they started in the FCS with a year of transitioning, and now they will be ineligible for the postseason this year. And then there's Akron, which is also ineligible for the postseason due to a postseason ban due to low academic scores, which is pretty laughable, pretty bad, and it feels like it shouldn't be a thing, but it is a thing. It's pretty embarrassing. They set the bar pretty low there. So that's the 0-loss club. In the 1-loss club, we've got a bunch more teams in here. And basically, the logic for putting these teams in here is that any team from the group of 5 that ended up losing 2 games and still making it, they played a power conference opponent in the non-conference. There's some schools on this list that are here. They can only afford 1 loss because they don't fit that criteria. I'm looking at North Texas. I'm looking at App State. I'm looking at Air Force. I'm looking at Liberty. Those teams do not play a power conference opponent in the non-conference and therefore can't afford more than 1 loss. I also have every CUSA and MAC team on here. If you look historically, I could actually be even more harsh with those schools because Liberty and Western Michigan from the MAC and CUSA, those are the only 2 schools that were ever able to make the CFP, or they would have made the CFP in their given years. Both those teams had to go undefeated in the regular season. In fact, Western Michigan needed multiple power conference victories. In this case, I'm going to say that 1 loss can be afforded to those teams just because something could happen where, let's say, one of Western Michigan this year, their non-conference losses, they end up having a really good year. I think they play Indiana this year. Maybe Indiana's a playoff team, and that goes down as a really great loss. That is the caveat for most of those CUSA and MAC teams on here that put them in the 1-loss club this season. But let's kick things up to the 2-loss club. We've got quite a few more schools in here. This is going to be almost every single group of 5 teams that just have standard normal schedules, maybe a power conference opponent or 2 mixed in there, but just most group of 5 teams. Any power conference team that is outside of the top 40 in strength of schedule as well. We looked at it earlier. Any team that's going to take more than 2 losses, that is 3 losses, they need to have at least a top 40 strength of schedule. It was actually 30 that was the cutoff, but here I'm being a little generous. I'm saying top 40, especially because the strength of schedule can be dynamic and that might change by season's end. But based on what we're looking at here, I think that these teams, they can afford a maximum of 2 losses. I know one of the ones that might look like a hot take on here is Notre Dame in the 2-loss club, because if they take that 3rd loss, they'll be 9-3. I don't think that's very hot of a take actually this year, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Notre Dame probably wouldn't be in consideration if they took that 3rd loss. And so I think I'm rocking with most of the schools in here. That is the 2-loss club. Teams in this tier can only afford 2 losses. Once they get that 3rd, they're most likely out of playoff contention. And then there's some teams that are sitting pretty in the 3-loss club. These teams have a strong enough strength of schedule that I think they could make the college football playoff even with 3 losses. Almost the rest of the group of 5 teams, I should say, are in here that weren't in that other tier. And that's just going to include some teams that play some tough non-conference games. South Florida is here because they play both Miami and Florida in the non-conference. They have some really tough non-conference games that they always schedule in there. You've obviously got a bunch of SEC teams that play extremely tough non-conference schedules and conference schedules. You've got Syracuse in here that has the most ridiculous ACC schedule I've ever seen. And then you've got some Sun Belt teams mixed in there. Old Dominion, Troy, they have some pretty tough schedules in there with some really tough opponents that could age really well, even in a season where you drop 2 strong non-conference games to power conference opponents and then maybe 1 weird conference game in there. I think they've got enough juice to get them out. You're measuring it to a different standard than the power conferences. You got to remember that because the group of 5 is competing for a different bid than the power conferences, basically speaking. So that is the 3-loss club. And then there's the 4-loss club. And I put these 4 teams up: Florida, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Wisconsin. They're all listed in the 3-loss club. And that's because I don't think the 4-loss club exists. I don't think it's real. I think it's a bit of a myth, a unicorn, if you will, something at the end of the rainbow that we'll never catch. Because last year, I sort of put Florida in the 4-loss club, but reflecting on it, I just don't know if a 4-loss team is ever going to get in there. If you remember when we looked back, there wasn't a single 4-loss team that was even in the top 25 at the end of the year by the committee, and historically, they've never put one in the top 12 in any of the 4-team playoff era years where, yeah, there wasn't a 12-team playoff, but it would be nice to see in order to be able to judge that. And so you look at the teams where maybe you could consider, you've got Florida this year. They play an extremely difficult schedule. It's the number one strength schedule in the country. They play Texas A&M, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee. They play Florida State in the non-conference. At LSU, they play Miami. So it's a pretty tough schedule. And you could talk yourself around it and say, okay, maybe they lose to Texas and Georgia and LSU and Miami. Is that good enough? Is that 8-4? Are you able to make it? And it's the same with these other schools. Wisconsin, that extremely tough Big Ten schedule is ridiculous, including Bama in the non-conference. So I just don't know. The fact that no team was even in the top 25 is pretty ridiculous. You could argue that there just weren't that many great 4-loss candidates last year. And so we look at some of those quote-unquote candidates that weren't even in that final CFP top 25. You've got Texas A&M in there, and I think a big reason they weren't in consideration is you look at that. They lost their last 3 SEC games to Auburn, Texas, South Carolina, and the committee looks at momentum. They look at how good you're playing right now. With Louisville, maybe they could have been in contention, but it doesn't feel likely for an ACC school. They lost that terrible game to Stanford. That ultimately is what dropped them out, and that win over Clemson was good. It could have boosted them, and they were actually, I believe, ranked before that loss to Stanford in a good position. But Florida is the interesting one, and the one that almost makes me think, could the Gators, with their schedule this year, be in that 4-loss club? Because if you look at what Florida did, they actually lost 5 games, and yet I believe they were 3rd in receiving votes in that final AP poll, weren't in the CFP rankings. But what happens if you flip that game against Texas? What if Florida beat Texas last season? I mean, it's just a hypothetical. I'm not saying they should have or anything, but think of how much the dynamic of their season changes. If they have lost at the start of the season to an ACC contender, Miami, a loss to Texas A&M near the top of the SEC standings for the next most of the year. They were a great team when they played them, much better than they were at the end of the year when they were bad with injuries. An overtime loss to a playoff team in Tennessee, and then a loss to Georgia. Those are their losses, and then in their revised schedule with a win over Texas, they'd have a win over Texas, which is a CFP team, one of the teams contending for an SEC title, a win over LSU, a win over Ole Miss. They'd have the other win baked in there early. I guess they don't really have a great win earlier in the schedule, just UCF, Mississippi State, Kentucky. But still, that's an intriguing resume to be able to turn in. So if any team were to be considered last year, it might have been the Florida Gators. But until further notice, and with the current way the committee judges these teams, I don't think a 4-loss team being able to make the playoff is conceivable unless, like I mentioned earlier, it's a miraculous run where they lose a bunch of non-conference games and they can eke into their conference title game and earn that auto bid. So that does it for this video. It's always a fun one to make. It might seem a little bit repetitive if you watch this same video from last season. I talk about a lot of the same numbers, but I just updated some stuff here. It's always awesome to take a look, and I know as a fan, you just want to be able to calibrate your expectations. What's good enough to get us into the playoff? It's always going to be case by case, but I think this is the closest reflection to a real standard for each team to have going into the year. That's all I got in this video. Again, it's one I really enjoy. Let me know down in the comments what more content you want to see, what types of content you want to see before the season comes. We're just a couple of months away. It's a very exciting thing. If you haven't picked up a copy of your digital preview mag, go do it right now. It's completely free. It's this puppy, but it's a digital version. I've made it free. I also have this physical version. It's record predictions, previews for all 136 FBS teams. And if you want a physical version, I'm still shipping those out every day. So those are available, but the digital version, like I said, is completely free. I'll link that in the bio. Thanks for watching, as always, guys. I appreciate you, and I will see you guys later this week.